Welcome to Boris FX Live. Sponsored by Dell Precision Workstations. Create without limits. And by NVIDIA. And Intel.
Hi guys, I am Mary Poplin with Boris FX, and today we've got a really great live stream for you. I wanted to tell you that we have Kevin P. McAuley here. He's going to be going over some wonderful Continuum and Avid things. We've got Mike Krulik from Avid. We've got Peter McAuley from our Boris Voice. He manages Continuum. He's the guy for Continuum. So we have all of that here for you today, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I do want to tell you that if you want to ask your questions, you can ask your questions live, okay? So if all you have to do is type in your questions, hit send, and we will do the rest. So make sure that you keep those questions coming. We will be live in the chat. We also have a giveaway. Now, the giveaway is how you win our fabulous prizes. So we're giving away 4 fabulous prizes today. Some of those prizes are going to be given to anybody who's watching this stream as long as you enter to win, and you have to enter to win. So we need your email address in order to get you prizes. So make sure that you put all of your contact info in at borisfxlive.com. All right, so let's talk about some of the prizes that we are giving away. We're giving away 12 months of Avid, which is going to be a subscription to Avid Media Composer. We are also giving away a 12-month subscription to the Boris FX Suite. We are also going to be giving away a 12-month subscription of Continuum. And our friends at Action VFX have given us a $200 gift certificate that y'all can win. So we're really excited about those. We also want to say thank you today to our sponsors. We have sponsors that are NVIDIA, Dell, and Intel. In fact, I am actually broadcasting right off of a laptop right now that comes from Dell and has NVIDIA and Intel technology inside of it. So there we go. Now, I want to go ahead and introduce some of our guests. So the first guest that I'm going to introduce is going to be Peter McAuley, and he is right here. So this is Peter. Peter, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, or do you want me to introduce you any further?
Sure, I guess I could do that. Thanks very much, Mary. So lovely to be here with everybody today on this live stream event. Thanks for joining us. And I'm really excited to sit and watch, Kevin and Michael chat about both their careers and also how they use Continuum and how Kevin uses Continuum and how he teaches it to his students. Just quick about me. I've been with Boris for a couple of years. I started here in 1999. So come September, I'll be into my 23rd year. A couple of years. Managed primarily.
Well, you were the guy.
Product. I'm the Continuum guy underneath Boris.
Yeah.
Yep. And really, the whole thing falls back onto Boris's plate. It's his vision, his idea, and we help him push this and have ideas of ourselves that we bring forward from our clients and customers and push this into the product. But it's his vision that has brought us here today, which is great. Proud to be a part of the team.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm sure that everybody's going to have a lot of really excellent questions for you. So, and yes, of course, Boris is the guy. Boris is Boris, but you are the product manager, and that's pretty awesome. So,
well, thank you.
And of course,
thank
it
you.
is a team.
Yes.
But yes, so we also have some folks here. We have Kevin McAuley, and not Kevin McAuley. Good Lord, Kevin McAuley. I'm sorry, I got everything mixed up today. Okay, so which is
it's
funny
all good. It's all good.
10 years. Yeah. Anyway, Kevin is going to be going over. He's going to be going over how to use the Continuum effects with an Avid, and Kevin. We'd love to hear more about what you're doing right now and what your expertise is and what you're going to be showing us. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I try to make sure I'm a little bit of can you be a little bit of an expert in everything? Well, probably not, but I try to make sure that I, am knowledgeable in as much as I can when it comes to, I try to say the Continuum package specifically, only because, especially these days, you see that with everything that's now included in it, you have, the I'm not going to call them the legacy effects, but the effects that we love from the past that are still here, but also, we have now Mocha integration. We have these new BCC plus effects, the Cinematographer's Toolkit. Conceivably, what's great about this package is that you can get it, and as you start to learn it, you can be like, oh, okay, well, you know what, maybe I'm going to start to do some basic Mocha tracking in here, and then you're like, oh, well, maybe we can now take this and advance it onto what I might need Mocha Pro to do for me in the job that I'm doing, as Mocha Pro is a plugin for Media Composer. So for me, I always half jokingly say that Continuum is my go-to. And as much as everybody likes to say, oh, I like to work with, only the tools that come with the system, the tools that come with the system can only take you so far. And unless you want to spend all your time exporting everything to, a third-party program like After Effects or something like that, there's a lot that you can do inside of Continuum, from keying to, again, like I just mentioned, tracking, to particles with, particle illusion, and just so much that you can do. The possibilities are endless.
So can you tell us a little bit about like what you're currently doing, as your job, and also how you got into that a little bit? Like, how did you get started?
Sure. The job, I'm one of the senior editors at Extreme Reach in Toronto, Canada. And one of the main things that we do is language versioning, which requires a lot of sort of reverse engineering of commercials. We'll receive a commercial from a studio. It might be in English. We need to have it in French because French is our second language up here. And what we'll have to do is to disassemble the spot and say, oh, okay, I recognize that was done with, lens flare 3D, and I can see a little bit of Mocha tracking in here, because the text is flying across the screen. Maybe we need to do a little bit of roto on this character and that type of thing. So, some of the work that we do is quite in depth. And for me, as much as, After Effects is an essential tool for me, I'm also, a huge supporter and proprietor of, do as much as you can inside the timeline. It's funny. For me, this job sort of came around with kind of like how all my other jobs have come around. I kind of jokingly always say I always give people resumes after the fact, because the job that I ended up with, this job, I think I've been there about 10 or 11 years, was the guy who ran the department. Basically, I knew him from 10 years before that, and he kept saying, I want you to come work here. I want you to come work here. But I was always busy doing other stuff. And finally, he tracked me down when I wasn't doing other stuff and said, okay, well, now you're coming to work here. So that was about 10 years ago, and I've been there ever since.
Wonderful. Well, I've mostly known you as a trainer. So can you, which, it's probably because we're thousands of miles apart. I was going to say all the trainers know each other. Yeah. yeah. It's kind of a little club. So how did you get into the education path?
To be honest, I was doing a lot of writing, a lot of work at Creative Cow. That's just pretty much how most people sort of know my tutorials. And it just became one of those things where everybody's doing Premiere tutorials. Premiere's a great tool, but the problem is that a lot of people, it's not that they're necessarily scared of Avid. It's Avid is very structured and rigid, and that is actually a very positive thing. Avid wants you to work a very specific way, or Media Composer specifically wants you to work a very specific way, so that if you start things correctly, you have no choice but to end things correctly, assuming you get a few steps right along the way, which a lot of people see as a negative. I see it as a huge positive. And for me, I just wanted to sort of break down the misconceptions that a lot of people have about Media Composer in general. And that was, God, I don't even know how long ago that was, a long time ago. But now I'm basically have my own YouTube channel, Let's Edit MC_Avid on YouTube. And I'm now actually doing Avid training at Seneca College in Toronto as well. So it's kind of been going by leaps and bounds. Thanks.
That's really awesome. And yeah, we don't want to say how long we've been training, because then we date ourselves.
Yes, that's right. Seems like forever.
we're gonna not do that.
That's right.
So one of the questions we get from like a lot of folks on our stream is, how how do you get started in the industry? Like, so would you have any advice for anybody trying to break into the industry, especially since you work with students right now? We'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, the first thing I always say to them is, don't ever work for free. First of all, free doesn't,
No kidding.
Exposure doesn't pay your rent, sort of as the expression goes. Because all the only person you're cheating in that situation is yourself. But also, don't be hesitant to, like, I started out, I worked, some days I was working 2 different jobs back in the days, when assistant editors were sort of the big thing. I would do one job from 6 at night till 2 in the morning, then drive to the next job, excuse me, from, 3 in the morning till 9 in the morning, just because that's what I needed to do. And to be honest, as the assistant, what's inevitably going to happen is that one day, one of the editors is going to be sick. I mean, it happens. And it's one of those things where a producer will walk down the hall and say, "Oh, Kevin's sick today? Well, you know where everything is, right? Can we just sit down and do this?" And that's your big break. You sit down because you're the assistant. You know where everything is, and you get it done. So one thing I also tell people is that there's really no such thing as a junior editor. The junior editor is an excuse to pay you less. So you're either an assistant or you're an editor. It's one or the other, and just make sure that you get paid what you feel you deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't value your work, nobody else will. That's
Exactly.
100% true. So, all right, I actually forgot to mention one of the things that was actually pretty important with Peter, and also you, because you were on these as well, or at least I noticed that you have been active on them before. We do have a forums that I really want to make sure, while we're talking about education and while we're talking about students and how to break into things and how to gain more knowledge, we have a forums on borisfx.com, and I want to make sure that y'all are going there, because Peter is super active on them. I'm super active on them. Martin is, Ross is, Brian is. Like, we are all on the forums, and we are super accessible. So make sure that when you guys do have questions and this live stream is over and you want to get very into the nitty gritty on something that really can't be answered while we're live, definitely log into our forums, make an account, and make sure that you are getting access to us, because we are very accessible. We are an extremely accessible company. I mean, hence the live streams, right? We're a community. We want to build the community, and we want you guys to be a part of it. So there you go. Now, also, we do have Mike Krulik here with us from Avid, and I want to make sure that we give him some airtime as well. So, hi, Michael. Michael, we have a couple of questions for you. We want to let you introduce yourself first, though. So, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do at Avid and who you are and what your goals are here?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for letting me join the live stream. So, and thank you to everyone who uses Avid and Media Composer, and of course the Continuum and Boris suite of plugins. So I've been with Avid for going on 20 years now, but I actually started even years before that working with Avid resellers, and even starting out when this whole world of nonlinear technology actually started. I worked for a company that was the first PC nonlinear editor, which was called Editing Machines Corporation. So I was at the trade shows where Avid was on one side on the Mac and Editing Machines Corporation was on the PC on the other side, and we sort of were battling it out in the nonlinear editing world. And Avid won out, which is great. And now Avid both being on the PC and the Mac, and it's been amazing. And also working with resellers, I had exposure with Media 100 and Panasonic Postbox and DS Digital Studio at the time. So again, being with Avid and seeing the technology change and seeing the amazing people who actually use the products and working with them has been fantastic.
Yeah, so you've been in on the game since before the game really started. You've been here the whole time.
The image was so pixelized you couldn't tell when people's eyes were actually blinking, when everything was just offline. And now we can finish now on system. So I think Kevin, you know exactly what I'm talking about with that.
Oh yeah, back in the days of AVR 3S, I think was back in the day. Exactly.
big blocky pictures, but now everyone is doing everything, doing color, doing effects, and everything in the packages, which brings us all together here for the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Avid, what's your position in Avid, and what's your day-to-day like at Avid?
I'm the video product evangelist. So basically, I'm evangelizing Avid to everybody. So basically, just I've been at trade shows when they were live on the stage doing presentations with Media Composer, with our plugins, with our technology, with remote editing and our cloud-based solutions. But day to day, I'm talking to editors. I'm working with them on the latest versions of Media Composer, helping them with questions they may have, helping even build the product. So I'm now more on the marketing side of things, helping develop the product go-to-market for Media Composer and our products. So spending a lot of time with editors of feature films, TVs, documentary, working with the American Cinema Editors organization and the Motion Picture Editors Guild, and anybody who wants to know anything about Avid.
Well, that's great. I mean, you have a lot of plates spinning, and clearly you have a lot of deep knowledge that we are excited to share with our users here. I also have a question for you that kind of comes up a lot in our live streams. What are your thoughts on AI and the future of post-production and having computers like assist or even in some cases do the work for artists?
Yeah, AI is actually a pretty hot topic, and I think it depends on where it's being used in the industry. I've talked to a lot of editors who don't like the idea necessarily of a machine taking over the editorial process. I mean, editing, it's a very creative process. It can be very personal. You're basically telling a story, and that comes from the human emotion. That's being able to go in and make editing decisions on the story or on the feel of the shot. So editors don't want to give that up to a machine, but there is some technology that is, a benefit with AI at this point, where things, if you're searching for shots or sounds, or, you have a whole, hundreds and thousands of hours of footage, maybe even from reality television, and you're trying to identify characters. So facial recognition is a form of AI that actually would be a benefit here. But I think giving up the reins to a machine for creative editorial might not be something that editors are wanting to do at this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's true. But of course, we've seen some really cool stuff that people have done with machine learning, like things like figuring out where sound effects are supposed to go and being able to replace them. Things like, as you say, finding faces, or, determining what the scene is, or maybe just tagging, that kind of stuff. The kind of tedious work that editors want to do. It seems like that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, and absolutely. There's other technology that allows for replacement of, images that may not be there. So for VFX, there might be some, tools that are available there with machine learning and AI. So there definitely is a benefit, but again, the creative process and actually having the humans do that is, what makes the talented people part of the process.
Well, exactly. Like humans are the storytellers, as you say. So that makes sense. Yeah. All right. Well, for those of you that are just joining us, I want to let you know what's going on here. So this is the Boris FX live stream. Welcome if you're just joining us. Make sure that you hit like and subscribe if you do like what you're seeing. And, we're going to be going over some really awesome stuff today. We just talked with Mike Krulik. We just talked with Peter McAuley. We just talked with Kevin McAuliffe. And we're going to go over a lot of cool things about the new Continuum and how that works inside of Avid. So we have some wonderful guests here. We've just had some really interesting exposition, and stay tuned because we are going to be giving away lots of prizes. Now, I kind of want to move on to the main event of this live stream, which is Kevin's demo. So he's gonna take us through what you can do with the amazing Continuum tools, which really, I mean, this is a huge release, and Peter can speak to that a little bit. But right before we jump in and show what Kevin's doing, but Peter, can you talk a little bit about this release for a second?
I'd be delighted to. So, thinking back through the Continuum product line, I mean, we've been inside of Avid since the beginning. And obviously, this is not the first product that we've developed for Avid. I mean, obviously, there's Red, Graffiti, FX, et cetera, and then we made Continuum a product for Avid. But with the coming of the M1 chip, we had a decision to make, which was how do we get everything to process on the GPU? Because, the M1 chip in Apple computers is all GPU, right? So we looked at that. We also looked at our performance across the board on multiple systems, on Windows systems with multiple different kinds of GPUs installed. And we saw that, we could really improve performance if we obviously moved everything off the CPU, stopped busing images, and kept everything processing directly on the GPU, on the image itself. So to that, we re-engineered the product, and we came up with this thing called BCC Plus. The plus being like the new plus added to Continuum filters. So all of the effects are still there, all the old legacy filters, if you'd like to call them that, and they've been supplemented with 90 brand new 100% GPU HDR compliant filters, and they're magnificent. And they really, I always say let the product speak for itself, and you're going to see how good it is when we start going through some of Kevin's timelines, and he starts showing us what these filters are capable of. But it's truly amazing. We've got integrated film looks, which we've called the Cinematographer's Toolkit, and it really is that. I mean, all of us, we're all cinematographers here, right? We're all telling a story, and the story that you tell can now be augmented and made look better with the use of these filters. And with a couple of clicks, you can make a video shot look like it was part of the Terminator set, or you name it, whatever film it was. So this is something that we're bringing to Avid editors today in what is the BCC Plus and the Continuum product for 2021 and forward. So that's, we've got this new thing called an FX editor. I'd just like to mention quickly that. We've always had the ability to browse presets and looks before actually committing to an effect and having to apply that to the shot and see what it looks like as you play it forward. Now we have a thing called an FX editor, which is like the next leap forward, not step, but next leap forward in terms of editors interacting with their footage inside of a Media Composer timeline. So what the FX editor has over what the previous FX browser had is, as the name suggests, editable effects. So this editor is a custom GUI window, which you'll see shortly when Kevin shows us what it is. And basically, users can now select a preset look. They can look at this on their shot live. There's a play button in there, so they can play the timeline inside the custom FX editor GUI. And then they can go and modify that effect with sliders, with color curve controls, with film response, with grain matching controls, and all these different looks. And then they can actually save this as a customized preset and then drop it into the bin, or just call it up as a special effect inside the editor time and time again on multiple different projects. It's tremendous. Really, it's a great leap forward, as the term I used. But that's what we're excited to show you today with Kevin's MC projects.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Peter, very much for that. And Kevin, are you ready? Can we see what's going on here?
I am ready here. Let me just share this here. Hold on, share, and then I'm going to switch over here, and hopefully you can see my screen now. And hopefully you can see the Media Composer interface. I'm sure that if you cannot, then Mary will jump in and let me know here.
Well, we can't see it yet, so I'm going to poke Mission Control and see if we can switch over.
Here. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Hold on a second here. Now we should be able to.
I'm excited.
Okay. Hopefully you'll be able to see it now.
Yes, we do see it.
Perfect. All right, great. So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to be going for about 45 minutes or so. We're going to take a break sort of midway through because I know that everybody's clamoring for the giveaways, and I don't want to hold them all till the end. So we're basically going to get through probably a good 25 minutes or so, 25 minutes, and then we can do some giveaways. But I just wanted to sort of start out by just sort of talking about Continuum and Continuum Plus, from a I don't want to say a media composer's editor's misconceptions of Continuum. One thing that a lot of editors are always concerned about is obviously their budgets. Budgets are obviously a big thing. Everyone has the misconception that Continuum is expensive. It's out of their price range. What's important to keep in mind is that when it comes to Continuum, as well as a lot of the other products across the Boris FX line, is that there's options. You can actually subscribe to Continuum on a yearly basis for only $495. Now, what's obviously the advantage of that? Well, if midway through the year a fantastic update like this comes out, you obviously get it included in the subscription. And as Peter said, we're talking about it's over 80 effects, close to 90 new effects that basically came in the 2021 version of Continuum. And really, the two things, the two main selling features of them are speed and performance. There's so many fantastic tools inside a Continuum, whether they're actual effects or under the hood features. But these ones are really good. And what I'm just doing here to get us rolling is just talking about how they sort of integrate into the effects palette, calling up the effects palette controller command in 8. For everybody, you'll notice that the Continuum effects don't look really any different than they did before as far as how they're categorized inside of the effects palette. But if you take a look at the actual effects themselves, now I just happen to park on grads and tints. Maybe what I'm going to do is come back to blur. That's sort of a better one to start with. You'll notice that the Continuum Plus effects actually say BCC Plus and then obviously the effect name, much like they had done before. But what's important to keep in mind is that there are entire new categories that have been added as well, specifically for some of the effects, like I had just sort of parked on, and kind of spoiled the surprise that we're going to come back to. Grads and tints is another category, brand new category that is only containing Continuum Plus effects. All right. Now, one thing that's actually kind of interesting about I'm not going to say a lot of the effects. I'm not going to say some of the effects. Depending on the effect that you're working with, some of these effects create a great look, and they really have very little parameters that you're going to have to worry about. So I started out with a fog effect. All right. Now you can see we got some heavy fog rolling in above this beautiful, very Game of Thrones-ish castle here. And what I had done is I'd actually just enhanced this shot, because in a lot of cases it's not about coming in and spending hours trying to get a shot to look the way that, I really wish I had added fog to the shot, or I really wish it was a foggy day. Maybe there's just a little bit of fog and you need to step in and you just want to enhance it to enhance the overall shot. That's what happened in this case. Now, I could step into the effect to sort of hide it and show it, but what I'm going to do is just step into the effects editor. Of course, as always, everybody knows who watches my tutorials, Shift and Y is my shortcut. You can always obviously navigate right here to call up the effects editor, and I can actually just bypass the effect like such. And you'll notice, again, it's just a very subtle addition, but what I wanted to point out here is the fact that really for the fog effect, there's not a lot of parameters that you need to adjust to create a cool look. And obviously at any time, if you're happy with this, you could simply take the effect and just drag it right off into a bin to use it at a later time. All right. Now, again, this is obviously subjective based on the effect that you're going to be working with. So let's use a different effect. And this is one that I'm going to come back to towards the end here, and that is film stocks. Okay. We got the same shot here. I love this effect. Okay. I'm just going to step into the effects editor, and you can take a look at this effect and just every possible parameter that you think that you might want to get in and adjust is pretty much available to you here. Now, we're going to talk about the effects editor in just a little bit to show you how you can basically create a preset or use a preset as a starting point to then sort of take the look wherever you want it to go. But again, I just wanted to get in and show you that some of these effects are quite in-depth, but other effects are quite simple to jump in and get rolling with. I know that that's always a concern, especially, I've sort of been with Continuum for a long time. So, when I jump in, my first thing that I always do, and everyone, I'm not gonna say everyone, a lot of people knock presets. I mean, presets for me are a starting point for everything. You can use that as sort of the launching pad to then get in and tweak the looks the way that are gonna work right, so that you can then basically have a bin full of of just effects presets that you can go to quickly without actually having to go and apply the effect. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the FX browser versus the FX editor, especially if you're new to Continuum.
Before we jump into that,
yes, Mary.
Before we jump into that, can I ask a question from the audience?
Of course.
Okay, so we actually have a question, which is a couple of users have a question, which is, can you use Continuum on the new M1 Max? And I think that question is going to be probably best answered by Peter and Michael. Do you mind if we loop them in for a minute?
By all means.
Perfect.
Okay, well, I'll take the first swing.
Perfect.
So let's see. I can speak for hosts other than Media Composer at the moment. What we have seen running in our labs is that both Resolve and FCP run natively on the M1, and our Continuum filter set will run behind the scenes in Rosetta within that host on the M1. So they will run. Native support is coming at the next major update, which is scheduled for mid-fall. And I could say that, Michael, we'll be ready when you're ready. Over to you.
Perfect. Great question, and something that we definitely are working on. But currently, the next available support for this will be with the Rosetta app. So we should be seeing that shortly. To be direct with the M1 chip and support, that will be coming soon. So we are still working on that. Again, a lot of change had to be made here. Unfortunately, that happens when there is a big change with the Apple systems and OSs. So we will be seeing that soon. But again, we will be supporting it with the Rosetta app shortly.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for letting me put you on the spot here. And if you guys are just joining us, make sure that you hit like and subscribe if you like what you're seeing. Remember to ask your questions live, and we'll answer them as best we can. And in fact, I'll just put everybody on the spot and have them answer questions. And
hey, if you want to put Michael and Peter on the spot at any time, I'm all good with that.
Wonderful. So we'll be doing that, and also make sure that you enter to win our prizes, because if you don't enter to win, we can't find you, so we can't give you prizes. We want to find you, so go ahead and make sure you put your information in. And with that, I'm going to give it right back to Kevin.
Thank you, Mary. And I was just getting into talking about the FX browser and the FX editor. Now, I'm going to call up the FX browser first. Now, I don't even know. Oh, I think this is a fast film process. And again, another one of my favorite Continuum effects. And one thing I want to point out about Continuum that makes it, a great application to work with is that you never have to worry about, oh, I did this job 5 years ago, and I used some effects that were in BCC. It would have been a numbered version at that point. Are the effects still going to work when I open up this version of the project? Well, what's great about Continuum is that if I head back to the effects palette, you'll notice that there is a category called obsolete that actually contains every version of an effect that's been updated. So even if you used, Mosaic, you could see OBS standing for obsolete. If you use that, however many years ago, that effect will still come up in a timeline so that you can then step in and possibly swap it out for a newer effect, even one of the new BCC Plus effects. So keep that in mind as you're working. Now, the FX browser, I'm just going to, again, step into effects mode, and you'll notice a little button right here that does say Show FX Browser. Now, you'll also notice that we do have a preset drop-down that gives us, obviously, I don't know if it's necessarily visual, but a word version of what this look might look like. But obviously, a visual version is much better than that. So what I'm going to do is just launch the FX browser. You'll see it looks a little something like this. At any time, we can come down and buffer our shot into the RAM on your system. I'm not going to sit here and make you sit through all of that, because basically it will buffer and then it will play back in real time for you. You'll see I can get to there before it starts chugging along again. And we do have many presets, obviously based on how many come standard with this effect, as well as how many I've gotten in and created myself, that you can get in and obviously cycle through until you find the one that you like. And at any point, you can always head down to the history at the bottom and jump back, maybe back to that sepia look, and then simply apply like such. Now, I do want to draw your attention to one thing when it comes to the FX browser, even though I know we're talking about Continuum Plus here, and this is just something not a lot of people realize, and that is that if you come into the 3D objects and you come into an effect like Title Studio, and we drag Title Studio down, you'll notice that it puts some text onto the screen. If you step back into the FX browser now, there's actually a text box down here. So once you've actually created your text look, if you were to come down here and let's just say I type in my name here, Kevin. I'm just going to say insert text. I can actually update my text directly from the FX browser instead of having to step into the actual effect itself, which is always very handy. But let's now talk about leaps and bounds forward. All right. And what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the FX editor. Now, I've talked about lens flares. I feel like lens flares are like my my go-to effect, just because they're so great to use in a very subtle way. And I mean, it's very rare that I'll use a lens flare to be big and bright and, in the middle of the screen. It's, in a lot of cases, it's very subtle. Now, you'll notice here, I'd say a fairly good range of parameters to work with the BCC plus lens flare effect. However, you'll notice that the FX browser has been replaced with something called the FX editor. Now, once you call up the FX editor, you'll see it might look a little bit like the FX browser, but we've got a heck of a lot more happening here than we do in the FX browser. Now, let's start out on the left, which is where inside the FX editor, the FX browser for it would live. And you'll see that I can just scroll through. This is, again, these are presets that came standard with this effect. I haven't created any presets for it. And you can see there's just an absolutely staggering amount. All right, and I'm just going to pick one at random here. It doesn't even really matter which one. I'll pick this one. Okay, call it up. One thing you'll notice inside the canvas is that the interface is super responsive. This is all in real time. I'm not sure if it's lagging at all, but this is actually super helpful. No wait time, nothing like that. Now, over here on the right, we have all of the parameters that we can get in and adjust. And again, you'll notice no lag at all when I want to get in and create the look that I want to create. And once we have done that, all we have to do is, I'll just position this roughly where I want to go. Maybe over here is fine. I can come right over here and I can click right here where it says create custom preset. And I can come in and call this whatever I'd want to call it. I could call it, KPM's lens flare number 1 or whatever. Give it a description if I want, and then save it out so that it will appear over here on the left. Now, maybe we'll just do that. I'm just going to call this KPM lens flare number 1. I'm just going to say OK. Now, you'll notice it's right down there at the bottom. We can navigate through, scroll all the way down to the bottom to get that flare. Or if you take a look in the upper left-hand corner here, you'll notice that we actually have all the different types of flares in here, including some custom flares. You'll see I actually did create a few. I kind of lied about that. But there's my custom flare and any other custom flares that I have created. All right. Now, this is all fine and everything. And you're probably thinking to yourself, Kev, I've seen 1,000 lens flare effects. You can get in, they're kind of standard. You're going to come in, adjust some things, and that's about it. Well, I'd say that in other effects that's true. One of my favorite lens flare effects is from Sapphire. It's I think it's called S lens flare. And the one reason that it's awesome is the flare editor, which is fantastic. It's flexibility. It's letting you get in and be as creative as you can be with a flare. Well, the beauty part about the FX editor when it comes to an effect like the lens flare effect is that you can navigate up here and we can click on where it says edit flare. All right. We now have a super in-depth flare creator. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to go back and I want to actually pick, I'm not going to say a flare I don't like, but a flare that has a little too much happening here. Like, for example, this one. Okay. And even if I was to put this sort of down here, I'm never really big on the polygons, these circles here. And it's always something that I always find myself removing. Like if we actually come back to my custom ones, you'll notice that actually when I was doing a tutorial here, I'd actually added a few of them back in, but you'll notice that with most of my flares, they don't actually have that in there. All right. So let's just head back. And again, I'm just going to pick any one here. This is, oh, that's a flare. All right. Let's just pick, sure, this one's good. All right. And what I want to do is I want to get rid of these because, you know, I know that as an editor, you're busy. And you don't have time to get in and necessarily create a flare from scratch. In a lot of cases, it's, oh, stylized flare 83 looks really cool. I'm not big on these things here, so maybe I won't use it. I'll go find something else. Whereas now what we have the flexibility to do is to come in to our edit flare option. And you'll notice over here on the left, what we have the ability to do is to either enable or disable any one of the flare elements. But more specifically, what you can also do is you can, again, solo, but we can always select one of them like circles and simply hit the delete key on the keyboard and now it's gone. So now you'll see, and again, in the flare editor, much like it was when we were in the FX editor, you again have complete flexibility to put the flare where you think you might want it, like here, for example, so that you can see exactly what it's going to look like before you actually say apply. So now that I'm happy with this, I'm just going to say apply. You'll see it's right there. Maybe I'm just going to bump the brightness up just a little bit here just to make it, there we go. That looks a little bit more like an actual sunset. And what we can now do is simply say apply. Now, of course, because the default position for the flare was up here, switching from the FX editor back into Media Composer is not going to remember that, but the flare itself is basically exactly the same. So we can take it, navigate it over there. Now, I believe this shot actually has some motion in it, which I didn't get in and animate to, but you basically get the idea of you know how, and one thing I sort of love, especially with an effect like lens flare, is the progression of lens flare throughout sort of the life of Continuum. Because I mean, we had, you know, BCC lens flare, then we had BCC lens flare 3D, and now we have BCC plus lens flare. Okay, so, and you'll notice that they've sort of taken, you know, monumental leap forwards. And this is really the first iteration of BCC plus lens flare. So there's going to be more under the hood features that'll be added to it as the effect itself moves along. So if you're going to jump in and start working with flares, get to know the FX editor, especially with an effect like lens flare, because you have so much more going on under the hood. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about what's going on under the hood, sort of as we move on to other effects. But before we do that, I want to keep the excitement level going because we want to give some things away. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw it back to Mary so we can do a couple giveaways, and then we'll jump back and talk a little bit more about some realism effects that we're going to add to some of our shots.
Perfect. Well, I think one of the things that we should give away is obviously a copy of Continuum, which is going to be a 12-month subscription to Continuum. And we are going to give that away. So we are going to give that away to Miguel. And congratulations, Miguel. We hope that you enjoy this. It's Miguel Guadalupe. I hope that you enjoy this 12-month subscription, which is awesome. And we're really excited for you. Now, I do want to make sure that you guys are putting your names into Boris FX Live and putting your emails in there so that we can pick winners, because that's the only way we get to pick a winner. Make sure that you like and subscribe if you are liking this live stream. And we want to make sure that you click like and subscribe, because that makes it to where we can continue to do these live streams. So we're going to go ahead and say, hey, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. And as we said, make sure that you are putting your information into Boris FX Live so that we can get you these prizes. Now, I do want to also ask a question. We have a question here that is for Michael, actually. And it's, does Media Composer support the latest Ampere cards by NVIDIA? Or Ampere? How do we say that? What are those cards called? Ampere? Ampere?
Actually, I would have to check myself. I mean, if you go, the best thing to do, and I tell people this all the time, is if you go to the Avid website and check the current requirements, we actually list by computer, by boards, by anything, by OS, what the minimum requirements are for systems if you're configuring Mac or PC. But you can also go to the specific Mac or PC, open up the PC or Mac that you're looking for, and it will tell you what graphics card is used and supported there. So offhand, I don't know, but I could definitely find out. If you want to send that directly to Mary or anybody at Boris, I'm happy to get back to you on that.
All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, I do have one more winner that we want to give away. I love that the answer to the question is like, check the stuff. But anyway, we're going to give away the Action VFX $200 gift card, which is awesome. Thank you to our friends at Action VFX. That's going to go to Randy Wheeler. Well, congratulations. Congratulations, Randy. We hope that you enjoy that. Action VFX has some wonderful, basically, assets that you can use to punch up your edits, to punch up your VFX composites, and they're all filmed. So they're beautiful and organic, and I use them all the time. So I think that you will enjoy those. So congratulations to Randy. You are our lucky winner. Again, remember to put your information in so that in the future, at the end of this, we can pick 2 more winners to win our other prizes. So if you're just tuning in, we are here with Kevin McAuley and Kevin McAuliffe, and he's going to be going over our, excuse me, I had something in my throat there. He's going to be going over how to use the Continuum tools right here in Avid. So let's take it back to Kevin.
Thank you, Mary. And we are back in another one of my comfortable timelines here. And as you can see, we've got a shot. And keep in mind, I think this has got 3 effects. 3. Yeah, it's got 3 different VCC plus effects on it. You can see me just dragging through here. This is at HD resolution, DNX HD 175, I think, or pardon me, high resolution. And you could see no slow down, no chugging along, nothing. I'd hit play, but obviously, our mileage will vary based on the bandwidth that you have. But what I wanted to do here was just to show you the original shot. Now, to do that, I'm actually just going to step into it here because that's just going to make life a little bit easier. So you can see what the original shot looked like, which looked a little something like this. All right. And basically what we did is we took that shot, and with a little bit of animation, we animated in not only the sunset, but if you notice, we have a little bit of a lighting effect happening around the sun with a little chroma abrasion there that gets bigger as we go, like that. All right. Now, this was done basically just with a few keyframes that I added depending on the effect. The sunset effect actually doesn't have any keyframes. It was just applied. These have a couple of specific keyframes to specific parameters. But basically, I'm just going to show you how I jumped in and did this effect. So let's just take the sunset. I'm just going to duplicate it. And we'll just call it Sunset Revised. And what I'm going to do here is to just remove the effect. You can always remove it right here with that shortcut. F5 is my shortcut to remove effects. There we go. Right back to what it looked like originally. Now, the effect that I actually used is in the grads and tints category. And surprisingly enough, it's called Sunset. So I'm going to take Sunset. I'm just going to drag it and drop it down onto my shot. Now you'll notice that it looks very different than what it looked like in the first shot I did there. It's a lot more subtle in this than it is here. Now it's a slightly different preset, but I did a couple things that you wouldn't actually even notice that I did unless you are looking very closely. Now, one thing I always like to do is when I step into an effect is I always zoom back, okay? Now, the reason I zoom back is because in some cases there's things going on here that you might not actually notice. Now, as soon as I stepped into effects mode, you'll notice that I have these 4 points here in each of the corners. Now, if you're familiar with Media Composer and the 3D warp effect, you'll probably recognize these as being corner pin markers. So I can adjust the corner pin, but you'll notice it's obviously not corner pinning the shot. It's actually corner pinning the sunset. Now, it's a little bit hard to see exactly what's going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to undo what I just did. Put it back the way we had it. Let's make sure we get all four corners back there. Perfect. Oh, one more. There we go. And again, we're going to go into the FX editor. Now, with the FX editor, what we're going to do first of all is I just want to show you exactly what's going on with this sunset. Now, we have a few parameters here to represent different sunsets. I think it may have been that one actually that I had used before as the base. Now, there's actually a gradient that's been applied over top of this. So if I head over here to the view, you'll notice that I have the output, but I can also actually get in and look at the gradient specifically. Now, for me, this is a little bit too much of a gradient. What I would rather do is just sort of have the gradient limited to really where the sunset is, or pardon me, the horizon line right there. So what I can do is just basically bring this point up, because that's really what we'd sort of be seeing if that was really a sunset. All right, it would be sort of brighter here, a little bit darker as we get to the edge, and then the reflection of the sky on the ocean. Now, if we jump back and we take a look at the gradient, you'll see it's a very different gradient than what we had before. Okay, but the overall end result looks very, very nice. Now, what's cool about this is that I can actually click on any one of the other presets, and you'll notice that as I click, the gradient parameter is not actually changing. So this is an easy and cool way to get in and actually just click through once you've got the effect looking the way that you like it to see what it's going to look like across the other presets. All right, now again, we could get in and save this as a preset if we wanted to. I'm not going to do that. All I'm going to do is simply say apply. And I want to point out that you don't actually have to do what I did inside the FX editor if you don't like. You might, need to just get up and going quickly because, I just got Continuum. I don't have time to get in and learn the FX editor. If I was just to remove this here, let's remove that. There we go. I'm just going to step out of FX mode there. Call it back up here. Sunset. All I'm going to do here is just go with the base one that we had here. I'm going to close that. And all I have to do now is basically just do the corner pin that I had just done, like this. Right here. Okay, now obviously I can't be clicking through the presets here, but I can also see the gradient right from here if I want, as well as being able to see what the original looked like. So I can say, here's the original, there's the output, and we're good to go. All right, now, what's important to keep in mind is that in the FX editor, you also have a whole bunch of tools to do this as well. You'll notice that when I came over to the dropdown, I didn't have the ability to see the original. Well, you do always have the ability to come in and see the two side by side, or even get in and do a little bit of a split screen. So client says, hey, what did that look like before you put that awesome looking sunset in? And they're like, oh my God, that looked terrible, but you did you did a much better job like such. So you have the flexibility inside of the FX editor to get in and to do all of these split screens and side-by-sides so that the client can see exactly what you did before and after. All right, I'll just apply out of that. That's looking good. And basically all I did now, as we as Media Composer editors know, is I just got in and stacked some effects. So I'm going to come down, and the lights category is probably my favorite category, and we're going to come down to basically my favorite effect in just a little bit. But all I did is I just hopped in and these effects here, there's just so much you can do to jump in and play around with them, because there's so many cool things that you can do with these. And the ones that I used was actually one that I'd never seen before, one called Ice Halos. I'm just going to hold Option or Alt and drag it down on top of that effect. And you'll see there's Ice Halos. If I step into effects mode, you'll see that I can actually position that directly over the sun. We can get in and adjust its brightness. We can also adjust its scale. And what I had actually done in the other example when I showed it to you when I first called it up was I actually adjusted its brightness and its size over time as it was moving across the screen. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that stacking order matters. All right. Now, I applied this effect on top of the sunset. So it's obviously giving me the look of the original effect itself. However, you might decide, let's just see if we can do it here. I was just like trying to do things that I hadn't planned for sort of on the fly here. There we go. Okay. I'm just going to remove that. And what I'm going to do is just step into the effect. And I'm just going to apply it here. Now, I noticed it did it with the source, which is fine. Let's actually just do it like this then. Okay. So there it is there. And I shouldn't have brought it in with the source. There we go. Okay. Now you'll see that the effect looks very different. Now, obviously, we're not in the right position because it should have been about there. But you see why stacking order matters, because it will create a very different look based on the order that you have it stacked in. All right. Now, let me just make sure I'm stepped all the way out here, which I am. And the last thing that I had done here, and I'm just going to place this back where it was. We'll just give it a little bit more brightness. I'm just going to shrink it down a little bit. One thing I always like to do is just kind of have it sitting on the horizon line like that. And again, that's maybe too bright. Let's sort of cut that in half. Just punch in, I don't know, 90. Nice. Is I went in and I went back to our lights category, and I just chose chroma bands. Again, Option or Alt and drag, nothing fancy. And all we're doing is basically lining this up like such. Okay. And I'm just going to adjust its scale, bring it down a little bit. And you can see that, I mean, I did this in 2 minutes maybe. The animation would obviously take a little bit longer, but basically in a couple minutes you could take a shot that, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it didn't look fantastic, because I'm sure it looked great when they shot it, but now we have a shot that has basically been taken right to the next level. Now, a couple other things I just want to point out before we move on. A couple of my favorite effects that I did mention at the beginning, and that is film looks and film stock. This is the cinematographer's. Please jump in, Mary.
I don't want to derail you, but before we talk about something else, I want to speak to the layer order that you talked, the effect layer order that you talked about. That is, you know, I've been with this company for a long time, and I'm sure Peter can agree with this. One of the things that I see the most problems that people get when using the tools together is the layer order. They don't necessarily know which way to stack them. So like earlier in this, we had a question about, well, how do I apply a lens flare to a title without, you know, without having it go over the background, you know, and that has to do not just with layer order, but also like how you're isolating the effects. And those little things, those little bitty, easy to miss things are the things that makes your composite in your edit either fabulous or not what you expected. So I'm really glad that you touched on that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah, I would mention.
Sorry, jump in, Peter, please.
Okay, I would just mention one thing. You know, we often look to our sister programs for inspiration. So, for instance, Sapphire had this apply to title matte feature that was working in a particular way. It was so easy to use. And we also in Continuum have an apply to title matte feature. But you know, when you start stacking the filters on a title, it can get a little unwieldy. So what we did was we just ripped all that out and took Sapphire's approach, which was fabulous and worked so easy. And then just redid the title matte function inside of Continuum to match that. And it's great. It's just so much easier to use. But just wanted to mention that. If you notice the difference between the older BCC filters and the newer way of stacking a title matte, that's the reason why.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
Well, that's also what's so great about, you know, having all the companies under one umbrella. It's you can now start to say, oh, well, maybe you know, Sapphire did it a little bit better than Continuum did in the past. So let's just sort of take that and we're gonna include it in here. And that's a great example that Peter just gave of a feature that came from Sapphire right over to Continuum. Now, a couple last things that I want to show before I get into the grand finale is, and I showed this a little bit at the beginning, which is the film stocks or film looks effect. We have two. We have film looks and film stock, two very different effects that do obviously similar things but very differently. All right, so I sort of showed this unwielding amount of parameters in here, and to be honest, with the film looks, or pardon me, with the BCC plus looks effect, this is the one where everything is going to hang on the presets, because that's really going to be your starting point. And you see that we just have a staggering amount of presets in here. And for me, it's not so much just about the presets, it's really about the tools that you now have over here in the parameters drop down that you can either, you know, add or remove depending on your needs. So for example, if I picked grainy, okay. Now, what I should have actually done here was, if I go back to dramatic, I believe that in dramatic, grain's not even turned on. It's actually turned off. All right. And then if I come to grainy, you'll see that the grain has been turned on and the fact that it's monochrome grain as well. But as grainy as it is, it's not completely overwhelming. I mean, if we're going for sort of an older look, and I'll just hit the space bar here just to preview some of this, this is a very cool look. And again, at any point, we could just drag that right back down. And you saw that I was doing this as I'm playing it here and adjusting it as it's actually previewing. So I can do this actually, not so much in real time, but I can do this to get to get real-time feedback of what's happening inside of the FX editor. This is, again, this is one of my favorite effects just because there's just so many, like, how many times have you said, I need a sepia tone effect? Boom, there's sepia tone. Even just have all the colors punch out, boom, there it is right there at the click of a mouse. And what I also wanted to show here was inside of our film stock, see the same shot here. If I step in and I step into the FX editor, there's even more advanced tools like the film response where we actually get our curves available to us inside of the actual effects editor itself. So the amount of control that we have over these effects is huge. Now, with that being said, I like to sort of sidestep to talk about sort of something else here. And we're talking about what advice do I have for editors who are just getting out in the industry? And one of my favorite pieces of advice that I give people is be very careful what you do on set. I can't undo something you've done on the set, but I can hopefully add it in if necessary. Now, before everybody in the chat window starts typing in, please don't say fix it in post. Please don't say fix it in post. Trust me, I'm not that type of person. I'm a fix it in production type of person. But with this compositor's toolkit, or pardon me, with the cinematographer's toolkit, comes some very, very powerful effects. And one of the powerful effects is the light effect. And I'm just going to duplicate the light effect because I kind of just ruined my own surprise here, but we're going to circle back to that in a second. I'm going to call up the effects palette. I'm going to navigate to the lights category, and I'm just going to come to BCC light. Fairly self-explanatory. What is this effect? Well, this effect is designed to make it look like light is being cast in through a window. And to be honest, it's a very, I'm not going to call it a simple effect. It's a very straightforward effect in what it sounds like. What I'm going to do is just step into the effect because what I want to show you here is not so much some of the parameters we have here. I'm just going to call up the FX editor. What I want to show you is all the different types of windows or patterns or elements that you can cast light through. So for example, if I wanted my window to be curved, I could select a window that looks like that. So for example, if this was a shoot that was going to look like it was in a church, we could have this cast in to look like it's being cast on the wall. Even patterns. One of my favorite patterns, and I'm never going to be able to find it in here. I don't know if I'd actually saved it as a preset in here. I didn't. There's like bamboo in here. And I'm sure I could probably come up to the search window and type in bamboo. It definitely wasn't called bamboo, but again, just the ability to add in trees and stuff like this, windows that look like that, different patterns. But for me, again, it's about the realism of the effect. Now, don't get me wrong, as much as the reverse number sevens don't look real. What I'm actually going to do is just cancel out of the effect for 1 second. I'm not going to save any of the changes. And I want to draw to your attention again the fact that I have those 4 corner pin points here. Now, you'll notice that as I start to corner pin, things get kind of a bit weird. It's not quite actually in the corner, and it's a little bit tricky to get things to kind of look the way that you want, because what's important to keep in mind is that the way that a corner pin works is it's pinning the corner. It's actually right up here, pinning from here, 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 and here to where we want it to go to. So it just requires a little bit of clever thinking on our part. What do I mean by that? Let me show you. I'm going to navigate to our scale in the X parameter, not in the Y parameter, just in the X parameter. I'm happy with the way that things look in the Y, but I really need to stretch things out a little bit to have them fit right over here to the corner in the X. So I'm going to turn gang off. I'm just going to stretch this out. I think it's somewhere like around 180 maybe. There we go. 180 is working good. What I'm going to do is I'm now going to place this in roughly a square, kind of about here. Now, the only problem with this is that we have to think about what this is actually supposed to look like. Now, what's important to keep in mind is, again, I'm doing this very quickly here, is that this perspective doesn't look right, because if you were to think about the way that the wall's cast, or the way that the wall is positioned, when the light hits the wall, it would hit the wall in a straight line about here. And as it's being cast down this way, it would either stretch out like such, or more likely stretch in like that to keep the perspective looking correct. Now, so there's our little cast in from the outside. So again, it's looking a little bit on the, maybe it's a little bit too bright, maybe it's not bright enough. What we have the ability to do is to break this down into two separate trains of thought. One is the light parameters, and the other is what's called the gobo. Now, if you're familiar with what a gobo is, think of it this way. I mean, I remember gobos from back in the day. You'd have this big light machine. You'd put these metal gobos into it that would have a shape. It could be a company logo or whatever. And you'd shoot it at the wall, and that would cast the company's logo up against the wall. So basically the same concept is working here. Our gobo is the shape of this window, the shape that was basically set in the FX browser, okay? Or pardon me, the FX editor. So what we have the ability to do is to do this in one of two ways. I can adjust the actual brightness, but more so the blur of the actual light itself. Or what I can do is put that solid as a rock and come down here, and we can actually adjust the blur of the gobo itself, but keep the outside shape as rigid and as sharp as we want it to be. Now for me, I'm more so a fan of the light blurring like that and giving the actual gobo itself a little bit of a blur as well, and maybe bringing the brightness down a little bit, just because then this creates a little bit more of a realistic looking window that's being cast into the room. Now, much like a lot of the lessons that I do inside of Continuum, it's never about the effect that you're making. It's about where you can now take this concept and move it one step further. Okay. Now, I'm going to use this shot just because I don't have a shot of an interview, but there's so many times where you might have an interview shot where you have the talent sitting. Maybe it's like I'll just say a medium close-up. And basically, they're sort of cropped off at the waist. We've got some space on one side of the screen. And maybe you thought to yourself, it would have been cool if we could have, cast maybe the show's logo or something over top of the person's shoulder, beside them, something like that. Well, that's where you now have the flexibility inside this effect. If we head back to the FX editor, all right, you'll see again, there's all of our shapes, but what we also have the ability to do is to navigate over here to where it says gobo. And you'll notice that I actually have the gobo called up here called shutters 10. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to browse because I've created my own gobo of the Continuum logo. And what I now have the ability to do is to put that Continuum logo. Now keep in mind, it's not going to do as much as I want it to do here. But what we now have the ability to do is to start to add in elements to then take this shot and really tailor it for what you're working on. Maybe it's going to be your YouTube channel's logo. Maybe it's going to be the company you're working for's logo. Maybe it's going to be, it could be any type of shape that you can think of. You would then have the ability to bring that shape in, bring it directly into the light effect, and actually cast it against a wall to then basically brand identify whatever it is that you're working on. So basically, that kind of wraps up, I always jokingly say, the very, very, very scratching the surface of what these effects can do. And of course, there's a free demo that you can download, and you can definitely try it out. Continuum is, to be honest, I don't even know what the effect count is that we're up to right now, but keep in mind that there's everything from keen to integrated Mocha tracking, effects that will fix things, flicker and things like that. There's just so many tools inside of Continuum that it's basically a tool for just about every job you could possibly have. And with that, I'm sure there might be more questions. Hopefully there's some more questions. What I'm going to do is just throw it back to Mary, and she can answer, or she can basically moderate any questions that we might have for anybody who is ready to answer them. So I will stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Mary now.
Perfect. Well, one of the things I do want to point out is, you had mentioned that you can download a free trial, and you can do that. And so you can do that at www.borisfx.com. So make sure that if you want to play with these tools and see if you want to, include this in your tool set, you can go to borisfx.com and, of course, try it, which I always recommend doing. Now, I think one of the things we want to ask Peter maybe is how many gobo presets are in the BCC lights? Uh-oh, you're muted.
Oh. Any better now?
Yes.
Well, currently we have about 120 factory installed gobos that are fully customizable to see. And what we see is that Kevin showed us that you can use any image as a gobo. So you can create your own custom gobos. And as a company that never rests on its laurels or just sits there idly while you guys use the software, we're currently working on the next batch of gobos, which will be included in the fall release. So we'll be adding 50, 60 more gobos to just this one thing. That's just one of the things that we'll be adding in the coming release in the fall. So over 120 right now.
Wow. Well, we also have some questions, which is, can we use Mocha tracking with those lights yet? And I think I know the answer, but
I think you do too. I love that question.
Yeah.
So let's just consider what Continuum was prior to our release of the 90 new BCC Plus filters that make up the push forward with Continuum into the future. So prior to that, we had, as I mentioned before, we integrate technology from our sister products and companies, and one of them is, of course, Mocha. So Mocha has been integrated into everywhere we thought people could use it, inside all of the Sapphire filters, inside of all of the Continuum filters. And this is super. So we integrated it as a kind of like a roto tool in a way. So you can isolate a filter effect using the integrated Mocha pixel chooser in the traditional or legacy, however you want to call them, BCC standard filters. This was also extended to parameter tracking. So in the BCC lens flare, you've got an integrated Mocha parameter tracker that will track a flare on the fly through your clip and an Avid. And that's great. And one thing that we're doing with the Continuum BCC Plus filters, as I mentioned, we're pushing them forward. This is our future. We're integrating Mocha in the matte and masking section for every BCC Plus filter, and as a parameter tracker, wherever it would work out for all these filters. So one of them would be anything with a point source, such as lights or rays or quarter pinning and stuff like that. So this is all coming in the fall release. Anybody who is actually on board with us today and has a valid subscription when we make that next drop in the fall, they're going to get all this stuff for free. It's just going to be part of the parcel.
That's awesome. Now, as a workaround, though, and this is me spitballing because this is not prepared or anything. We are live. So one of the things I would like to know is right now, obviously, we'd love to see that stuff in the future. But right now, could you maybe use an insert inside Mocha Pro to do that if you were using the Mocha Pro in your plugin, or potentially could you use a BCC corner pin and maybe some compositing tools that there's some BCC filters that do force Avid to composite that you could use. In theory, if you stack the layers right, I think to make this happen. Is that true?
Oh yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah, I'd have to play with it, but I think that's probably very possible. So,
yep.
So that's pretty
exciting. A little
too.
bit of a workaround, but yep. Yep.
I mean, I'm good with workarounds as long as it works. So that's the thing. So also, we did have some more questions, which is with these lights, can you reflect this light or wrap it around the talent?
Well, I think you can kind of do that. So one of the things that you would do with like the for instance, the BCC plus lights filter, Kevin was showing us how to apply a gobo, whether it's one of the factory installed or a custom gobo, onto a flat surface like that wall. If he were to apply this to, say, a more of a 3D shape, like a human face, if he were to project that light onto my face, there's a distortion parameter, and you can just adjust this distortion parameter, and it'll bend the lines like along with the contours of your face, so you can actually like make it look as if it was actually like in the shot in 3D. It's a beautiful filter.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it? It's probably. I feel like it's related to the optics filters that do a similar thing, which is also a sister product, and they will definitely wrap around the geometry. Well, the geometry, I say, it's not truly geometry. It's a distortion map based on what it can tell about the values inside of the shot. But it's still pretty awesome.
Oh, it's incredible. Yep, and you're absolutely right. Yep.
That's wonderful. So for Michael, we actually have some questions as well. So the new titler doesn't support continuum effects like glow. Is in the future the titler going to do things like support plugins like Continuum so that we can apply those to Avid's native titler?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, because the new Avid Titler Plus is actually an effect itself, so we'd have to see how that could be engineered. So I will definitely make a note of that on our little feature request list and see if that could be done. So it's not there yet. Maybe. We'll see.
I like a feature request, though. Feature requests are good. And thank you for listening to that one. Let's see. Gosh, do we have any more questions from the audience? Let me look.
Well, I have something that I could offer on that. Let's say you're an Avid editor, and ideally you're using the Avid title tool to create your titles and keep them live in the timeline, which is what everybody wants, right? So another workflow that some people use, and I'm sure you're well familiar with this, is to create a static title in a different application. So maybe like Photoshop or something. A lot of editors are doing this today. They'll either receive or create titles in Photoshop and want to insert this into an Avid timeline, and then filter it and make it fit a little bit better in that shot. So with that, you could actually then filter that Photoshop title in the timeline with Continuum or Sapphire filters or Mocha filters, and you can apply any of these same filters that we've seen in the last hour and so. Affect just the title and not the background, and so this apply to title matte is fully functional inside of Avid. It's just at the moment with Title Plus, when that gets expanded to accept filtering, it'll work. But in the time being, Photoshop titles work too, or there's always Title Studio.
Yep, that's true.
Mary, if I could just jump in for a second, one thing that I want to remind everybody, and not so much remind them, but let them know that there's a ton of training for all of these the Boris FX products over on the Boris FX YouTube channel. But more so than that, what I actually encourage people to do is to watch, Mary's Mocha tutorials, watch Ben and John Dickinson's particle illusion tutorials, because what's important to keep in mind is that they might be doing an After Effects tutorial, but in a lot of cases, you can transfer 95% of what you're learning from these tutorials from an application like After Effects, even if you don't even know it, to work with inside a Media Composer, because the interface for the integrated particle illusion is almost exactly the same inside of Media Composer as it is inside of After Effects. It's like, with I always say that, Mary actually unknowingly taught me how to do Mocha tracking because I watched all of her tutorials on Mocha tracking. And, even though the integrated tracker is not up at what Mocha Pro is, a lot of the basics tutorials are going to cover everything you need to know to at least get you up to speed with doing basic tracking inside of the integrated Mocha tracker within an hour or two.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The planar tracker is the planar tracker, and it's the same for all our tools, right? If you watch our tutorials and it's a Sapphire tutorial, that Sapphire tutorial is going to work no matter what your host is in. It's a plugin, and the same thing is true of Continuum. You know, if you're watching a Continuum tutorial and it's in Premiere, but you want to apply those concepts to Avid, yeah, absolutely. It's the same tool. It's just a plugin, so it works with whatever host. And you know, you can always find all of our information on our website. And two, not just tutorials. One of the things that people never do is read the manual. We have manuals for every single one of our pieces of software. And by the way, they're super useful. So if you want to search for a term, or you know, you're not sure what the interface is labeled as or whatever, if you go to our documentation, which is right there on our website, you can find so many like in-depth breakdowns of what the tools do. And in Continuum in particular, because Continuum is so deep and so heavy, you know, I've worked for this company for a long time, and I don't know everything about every tool. And I often find myself going to get help, you know, and then I read the breakdown for how the effect works. And that's also, I mean, that's super, super, super useful. So make sure that you're doing that. There's no shame in asking a question. So, and even if you're asking the internet that question. So, and that also brings us back to the forums, which of course we're all on. So definitely make sure you're doing that. All right,
so
guys. Read the manual, guys.
Read the manual. I mean, but we all don't, right? I mean, I was a compositor and artist myself before getting to software. I didn't read the manuals either. I'm ashamed to say.
When I was first learning Silhouette, I was scolded for not reading the manual, which again,
proper
I
order,
then broke out and read. So there you go. I mean, I won't scold you if you don't read the manual because I'm here to help, but I definitely got scolded for not reading the manual. So, okay, guys, well, I guess we can move on to winners because we've reached the end of our presentation. You know, that was a great job by Kevin. Thank you, Peter, for being here. Thank you, Michael, for being here. Y'all had just invaluable things to contribute. And let's talk about the winners. So, gosh, let's see. What do we want to give away first? I think we want to give away the Boris FX Suite. So, and then we're going to save Avid for last, I think. So we're going to give away the Boris FX Suite. That's going to be a 12-month subscription. And that is going away to, drumroll please, Jill Paget. Thank you, Jill. And we are so excited for you. That is a great prize. So that is the Boris FX Suite annual subscription. That means you get Continuum, you get Sapphire, you get Mocha, you get everything. You get all our stuff. It's all for you. And today's giveaway also is going to be for Avid's 12-month subscription, and that's going to be going to, drumroll please, who is the Avid going to? It's going to Nathan Downing. So congratulations, Nathan. We hope that you enjoy that. So those are some really awesome giveaways. We're really glad that y'all put your information in, and we're going to send you an email to follow up for all of our prize winners. And congratulations very much. Now, okay, I think that's about it. We kind of want to wrap it up. So follow us on our social medias, okay? So all of our social medias, we have a Facebook. We've got more than that. We've got Twitter. We've got everything. So follow us on social media. Go to our website at borisfx.com. Make sure that you are hitting that like and subscribe button because that keeps these going, okay? And you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. So YouTube is going to be where you're going to find a bulk of our tutorials, and Instagram is going to be where you're going to find a lot of teasers for our tutorials and some tutorials as well. So Facebook is where we tend to do a lot of updates, Twitter as well. So make sure that you follow us on social media. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Join us next time. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching, guys. And thank you to Kevin, Michael, and Peter. And thank you to Mission Control, which is Brian behind the scenes. So thanks so much, guys, and have a wonderful day.